I am so excited to have on the podcast today Marissa Hess. She is the founder of Urban Cottage Educational Collaborative in Tampa, Florida. She is a former public school teacher who has undergraduate and graduate experience in special education. Interestingly, Marisa was homeschooled for a good chunk of her childhood from about fifth grade to 10th grade, and then went to a private school for 11th and 12th grade. So she'll share a little bit about her experience learning in a more unconventional environment, and then going off to conventional school as a public school teacher, then choosing to homeschool her own children, send them to Montessori school for a while, and then create Urban Cottage, which is really a homeschool support center for local homeschooling families that offers daytime programming for homeschoolers, as well as after school programs and summer camps, tutoring programs, and homeschool consulting. So, Marisa Hess, welcome to the Liberated
Thank
Podcast.
you. Thank you. I'm super stoked to chat with you.
I am so excited to chat with you. We first met a couple of years back at the
Mhm.
first annual National Hybrid Schools Conference just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. That's put on by the National Hybrid Schools Project, run by Eric Warren, a professor at Kennesaw State University, and really brings together hybrid homeschools and homeschool resource centers like yours and micro schools and pods. So
Yeah.
it's great to meet you in person and then to
I
connect
know.
again recently at the first annual Innovative
Right.
Educators Network Conference in South Florida. So thrilled to have you on the podcast to share not only your experience as a homeschooler yourself, but then
Mhm.
as a homeschooling parent and now an entrepreneur who serves homeschooling families in Tampa. So let's start, Marisa, with your reflections of what you remember as a homeschooler yourself, kind of what that experience was like for you and your family choosing an unconventional path.
Yeah. So being a homeschooler, I think was really important for me because I was homeschooled in upper elementary through middle school and then early high school. And I think it was one of the greatest gifts that my parents could have given me was being able to explore who I was through middle school and early high school without the influence of society and of the other children and students trying to impact that. I was able to be who I was. I was able to explore my hobbies. So I was like a seventh grader with a Birds and Blooms magazine subscription because I could study nature and birding and all of these really untraditional, nonconformist type of topics that I wanted to study, and I wasn't afraid of that. I didn't have to explain why the hobbies that I had. It wasn't something that I had to feel, nervous about. And so I think it was one of the greatest gifts that my parents could have given me was to be able to explore who I was centered around a nonconformist concept of education. And I think it's because of that, my parents were very, in the very best way of the term, disruptive parents. And so I was able to be raised in so many different ways of education and philosophies, and then I continued to do that through my path until I figured out, wait a second, what is it I can do. So I think as far as homeschooling as a student, it was the best thing my parents could have given me, especially in that time in life where there's so much unsurety and there's so much anxiety over who am I and what does society say I'm supposed to be and who am I supposed to be like them, but it feels like I'm denying who I am or what I am is not acceptable. And so I wanted to be able to give that to my children as well, because I knew that was such a place of confidence for me, was that I was able to be who I was, even if it didn't fit the typical norms for everybody else. And so I was homeschooled and loved that part. I think one of the things that was an inward struggle as I went into college, as every young, I should say older teen, young adult begins to really become more critical of their upbringing. And so and it might have been a little bit of ego and arrogance, I will admit. And so I left homeschooling and had gone for 10th and or 11th and 12th grade into traditional private school. And so I left that and I was like, I'm going to be a teacher and I'm going to be a real teacher. I'm going to go to school for real education, not like what I had. This is like enlightenment here. And so I'm going to go the traditional route because that's what real education is. And I told you it was a little bit of ego. And so I went, but I was exploring. I was exploring what those ideas were. And so it, was really a pivotal part of my ethos of who I would become is to really explore this idea of traditional education, because without this idea of traditional education, I wouldn't be where I am today, because I had to explore the what other options are there so that as a disruptive thinker, I could create my own version. So I went into traditional education, and I ended up, as most do, in public schools for Hillsborough County here in Tampa. And then I actually ended up going to Collier County, which is the Naples area, still on the Gulf Coast. So I did that for a little while as well. But I was in the public school system and in special education. So I worked in kids, who were having learning disabilities and then gifted, as well as I had a class for kids who had been in prison and were at risk for dropout. And so I worked with parole officers for their grades and for their education as well. So I had a little bit of a public school experience.
Yeah, and what was your impression of that as a teacher in a conventional public school, especially working with special ed kids? What did you find interesting, surprising? Yeah.
I think my first school that I worked at, I will have to say that my experience, my first year at this public school was phenomenal because I had a phenomenal outside the box disruptive principal thinker. And he just was incredible. And because of that, he said, we were a Title I school. We were in a very struggling area. He told us that he wanted us to know where everybody lived. He wanted to know, where does your student population come from? Ride the bus, go drive around, go do whatever. You don't commute from somewhere else and come in and then just have your little bubble in your classroom and then leave and go back to where you live. Like, actually understand, where are your students coming from? So he had a really beautiful perspective on understanding the kids that were our students. And we were a D school. And so he said, he's like, I want to make this better. And so we have to think outside the box, and having someone who was your supervisor like that, who would do anything to help students succeed, is a very different experience. It's one that I feel like every child deserves, but that unfortunately within the system is rare. And so, and I would find that out later on, because so I thought this first year, this is everything I could have hoped for. This is fantastic. I had worked with him previously. I was there an entire year for an internship, and he kept requesting that I be able to come back, and I was very excited to come back. So I actually spent the year before in my student teaching there as well, and then became an employee with great joy. And so when he asked me before I went to go teach that first year, he said, I have this idea for taking kids who are not qualifying for special education classes for learning disabilities. Their numbers are not matching. So is there any way you could, we'll put them in one class, but this is not going to be a scenario where it's called a special ed classroom. We're just gonna just have you in there, and it's gonna be just a traditional regular classroom, just like everything else. But I'm gonna put these kids who are really struggling and they're not matching. And all the teachers are saying, but there's something going on and I can't put my finger on it. And I was like, yes, but we have to get portable. So I wanted one of the, portable classrooms when we had outgrown our school. And as a lot of Title I schools, we didn't have the money or budget to be able to have enough classrooms. So we had a lot of portables. So I said, I want you to give me a portable, because I know for a fact that if I'm considered a traditional classroom, it could be an issue, because they have very strict layouts of these state standards of what you should be teaching on this day for this amount, and this is had to be covered, and your lesson plan has to reflect that standard for this day for that class. And I said, if you're asking me to do what I know you're asking me to do without saying it, I'm not going to be able to teach those standards with these set of book curriculum in the way that I'm going to have to. And so I need you to put me way out there so that I just get to do my thing. We have a bathroom out there. Let me just teach kids in the art in which I think kids with learning disabilities should be taught. And so he did. He gave me a portable, and I was out there, and it was a beautiful year. And unfortunately, that next year he retired. And I was told from the beginning, this is not how we're going to do things. And so I knew the handwriting on the wall was that that classroom was going to be taken. I knew that wasn't how because it was too disruptive. It was not acceptable within the system. The rules were broken to be able to have it. And so I knew that that was just not going to be an option for me. And I knew that I couldn't stay there if that wasn't going to be an option, because I had experienced this small taste of how education should be, which is where kids are seen by someone who knows and loves them and has the freedom to be able to use the art of education and be able to teach them for what their needs were. And it was a beautiful year, but I knew if I couldn't teach like that, then that was not the right place for me. So I left my school. So
then you ended up homeschooling your children, kind of
did.
out of the gate, wanting to give them that sort of individualized, personalized learning experience, and you did so kind of independently in the beginning. I wonder if you can share those kind of early days of homeschooling your own
Yes,
kids.
yes. I had, and then I had 3 children. I have 3 children, and my 3 children, I knew that the traditional education was not for me. And I knew teaching, and I thought, I just feel like this is just not the right thing to put them in a public school. And so I thought, well, I was homeschooled. So, and that was a beautiful experience. I'd gained a little bit more wisdom and less arrogance over my years of having 3 children. And so I said, I think homeschooling is going to be the right decision. So I got really excited and I said, okay, we're going to homeschool. And so I had 2 little ones and, an elementary schooler and 2 preschoolers in elementary school. And I have a property. I live in like the historic urban area in the urban corridor of Tampa. And so I have a house and then I have like a mother-in-law house behind. So I was like, oh, that's it. We're just going to go to a different space because we live in a tiny house. It's only 1,000 square feet. We still live there. And so I thought, well, I'll just have a separate space. And I knew being homeschooled, we just need to be at a table. I wasn't trying to set up a classroom. I said, no, we're going to be homeschoolers. I just need to do it in another space because we can't live and school, all 5 of us, with a dog and 1,000 square feet. We can't do that. So I knew at least my boundaries there. And I said, we're going to go to the back house. So I had my back house and I started homeschooling and I had a table and we set up these things. And I did it for like probably 4-ish months. And it was at that point, I was like, I think this is the worst thing I've ever done. This was a terrible decision. Like, this is a terrible decision. My husband was starting his own company. There were some things that, he was traveling. He's a flight paramedic. So he was gone all the time. And so it just ended up being me all day, every day with 3 children, nonstop, nowhere to go, like just a library circle. It just mentally was just not a good place for me to be sustaining every part of my children's development 24/7 for such a long time in a house by ourselves. I just felt like this is not healthy for us. And I noticed that my kids were just searching for more. And it was in that point that I had this realization. Again, all of this was being part of the disruptive thinking that I thought I needed these experiences to be able to understand one day what I would need to create. And it was in this time of homeschooling that I realized 2 things. There is a hard discussion to have with moms, because I know as a mom that nobody cares about my children's education more than I do. That's not because I'm a teacher. That's not because it's because I'm a mom. And what I found myself talking to teachers that were my friends from before and saying, you underestimate what a mom can do. Like, you underestimate what a mom brings to the table when she says, I love this child and I want their good more than anyone in the world. She's motivated like nobody you've ever seen. And you cannot underestimate a mom. And so I took that piece with me because I had experienced that. I care about my children's education. But the other piece I took was the other side of the coin. And that was that I felt like as a homeschooler, my children never had the beauty of someone who loved their subject area. Like someone who loves science and it's their expertise and they're passionate about science or math, heaven forbid, the kingdom of math. If you have a teacher who loves math with all of their heart, You can never put a candle to a teacher that can pass on that passion and love for their subject area. And I sat there in that back house and I thought, I can't give them that because I'm not passionate about any of these areas. I'm passionate about language arts and I can give them that. And so that's great. But then what? Like, how? So there was this double-sided coin that I kind of took away from that time. So I thought, well, who's disruptive in education, of traditional educations? Who's disruptive? And I've been in Mexico teaching in the interim between those things. I was the head of a language arts department in Mexico City, and I'd lived in Costa Rica. And so I thought, the Montessori school I taught at, I was a language arts director for a Montessori school there, and it was incredible. And I loved the Montessori school philosophy. So I'm going to take my kids to a Montessori school. That's got to be the best way we can do this education thing. So I quit homeschooling and I showed up at the door of the Montessori school that I still have a wonderful relationship with and just meet with regularly and love them so much. And I knocked, on the gate and said, hi, I have 3 children and I'm a teacher and I'm a language arts teacher. And I really want to be part of a disruptive education for my kids and for me. Is there any way we could talk about my kids coming here and me teaching here? And I don't know what you could use because I don't know anything about actual Montessori philosophy. Can you help me? And would you even be willing to talk to me? And they were so loving and gracious and we're like, we get it, we get it. And so I just found this really sweet kindred spirit of we want to disrupt education and do something different. And so my family was there for 2 years at the Montessori school. But it was at this time that I was finding that my husband at the time, as a flight paramedic, he was actually starting his second flight business. And so not only was he traveling, but he was having his businesses. And so he was an entrepreneur, and there was just a lot of creative energy and a lot of things that were being part of our home and our time. And so he was traveling at really weird times, and it simultaneously was when my younger 2 were in kindergarten. And in kindergarten, they in the state of Florida, it's not required if you're homeschooling, it's not required to register as a homeschooler unless they're 6 by February. But if you're a school and you offer a kindergarten program, you are required to offer a full day program. And so here I was with my kids in kindergarten, and I'm like, they don't get time to play outside. And I think this education is beautiful, but I don't understand why they can't just dig in dirt for large portions of the day. I don't understand why they can't nature journal and draw caterpillars. And why can't they do this for large portions of the day? They're children. I don't, where's the gross motor movement, and where is that? And so there were, again, it was part of that journey of disruptive education, where even the thing that I thought in my mind 2 years before was the most, disruptive of concepts in education I was finding it just wasn't what I wanted for my own children. And so I decided that I was going to do something different. And so I left the Montessori school and started something different in my own back house. I turned it into something very different from there. So.
And that has evolved into the Urban Cottage Educational Collaborative. You're recording from your beautiful space.
Right.
That's now not, this is not on your property.
So
No,
it is
right?
not. No,
Yeah.
I started in 2015, and I didn't know anybody that was doing anything like this in education. I didn't know anybody. And again, it wasn't even until I met you and went to the first conference. I had a friend who was like, hey, there's this thing in Georgia, and like they're going to do outside of Atlanta, and they want to get people who are doing alternative educations and like support systems for homeschoolers and hybrid schools and micro schools and all these things. Do you want to come? And I was like, oh, wait, what is it called? And, of course, it was just this weird, in 2020, these ideas of learning pods came out. And then you started hearing these things of like cottage education, all these things. And meanwhile, I had been in my back house with 10 students and 3 teachers, and we had been doing this thing, and I didn't know anybody else that was doing anything like this. I thought I was making it up, which I was, but there were also just a bunch of us making it up, in similar ways. But I didn't realize anybody else existed. So that was how that happened. But in 2020, I had been in my back house for 5 years but I kept having to say no because there were only 10 students. I was on my property and I knew at some point, this isn't zoned commercial. There's nothing if I have an upset neighbor or something, it's also my personal property. So there's liability there. And I thought, I don't know if this is a good idea. So I began to kind of, think, well, what if I didn't have to say no to more students? What if I didn't have to? What if I get to hire more?
Because there was so much demand, right, Marissa, that you
So
were seeing?
much demand. Yeah, there was. Go ahead. What was your question?
Yeah, no, just what were you seeing from parents in your area? Why were they attracted to alternative education and this little pod school in your backyard, that of course
Right.
has grown from there? But what was it about that model that they found compelling?
Um, I think I think ultimately the parents that I was attracting were parents who felt, and I still hear this, which I feel really good about the ethos of who we are, because I still hear the same thing that I heard, almost 10 years ago. We're in our 9th school year. I still hear the same thing. And that is that I feel like my child is seen there, and I want my child to be seen. And I think a lot of times it feels like, where is the environment where someone knows my child? Where is the environment where if I ask them, what did my child do in math today? The person who taught them math knows. Like exactly, like not like in general, I taught this to 25 students. I mean, actually, like, what did my child do in math today? And I know as a traditional teacher, I was petrified at that question, because it was not until the quarterly reports and meetings would go out that I would actually get a full picture of exactly where every child was. Like, it wasn't until I was able to sit in that portable, and then again after the other experiences in other traditional education environments, that was a fearful question that I had, that a parent would specifically ask me, like, what did my child learn in X today? Because I didn't know, because I taught in general, maybe even to like 10 kids, but like, I don't know about your child. Like, I don't know. And I think as both parents and teachers, we want that for kids. We see why there's beautiful, tangible benefits of a child being able to be seen for what their academic needs are today, not this school year, not this quarter, not this semester, but like today. And we know that in our heads, but how that flushes out practically is just not as common as I wish it were. And so I knew that I needed to do something different. And I think there's also just an element of safety. There's just a lot of scary things in the world that we want to protect childhood and let it be beautiful. Let kids be able to be kids and run in the dirt and do all the things I knew that kids should do, but in a small group that feels safe and protected and honors parents' values and family culture. There's not a lot of traditional environments. I actually had a parent in an interview yesterday tell me, because I was interviewing them for our program, and I said, like, I just feel like, I asked them, the first question I said is how do you think the urban cottage fits your family's goals and culture? That was my first question at the table. And both the parents looked at me for a little bit, and then the dad piped up and he said, I don't know that anyone has ever asked me that question. I feel like they tell me, here's our box. We have to decide, like, if we fit in their box. And so I looked at him and I said, well, I'm really sorry, but that's not who I am. So how do you think the urban cottage fits into your family's goals and culture and values? And I just don't think that that's a common question that people get. And so when a family chooses to homeschool, or they chooses some alternative education, it's their empowered perspective of being a parent, that if they give us the absolute privilege and honor and joy of subcontracting some part of their child's education to us, then it's not my job to teach my family values or my family culture on them or my viewpoints. That's theirs. And if a family and parents are able to speak into those things for children, then their freedom allows them to do that. And it's teaching values. If I do it, it's brainwashing. And so that's not what I'm interested in doing. I'm not interested in telling a family what their values and their culture and their schedule and the list goes on and on. I'm here to say, here's what we offer. We offer math and we offer all these things. How do you think we fit into your family values, and how can we support your family?
Ugh, I just love that. So you were in the backyard for several years, and then there's just more and more demand that you can't keep up with. So
Yes.
you decide to lease this gorgeous space that you're recording from. And now tell us what the program, what Urban Cottage Educational Collaborative is, what it
Sure.
offers, what is sort of the typical week like there?
So I was in my back house for 5 years, and then I leased this. I started looking in January of 2020. And then I leased this the middle of February 2020 to start March 1st of 2020. And I panicked because my thought was, oh, I'll just move into the space in March, and then, I'll kind of I'll move my kids from my back house into here. We'll kind of finish the school year. We'll kind of practice a little bit. And then maybe I'll offer a little bit of camps to try and offer some tutoring camps in the summer. And then I can launch, kind of a bigger, more robust program for homeschoolers in the fall. That was not going to happen because March of 2020 came and the world ended as we knew it. And so all of a sudden, I started getting inquiries because everything began with COVID-19 to just educationally. Those of us who had been in education, we knew it had hit the fan already. That's why I had been doing this since 2015. But there was so much of it that it revealed that it hit the fan a long time ago. And most families, unfortunately, didn't know that. People on the inside, people, they kind of were feeling this grinding of a wheel is not feeling good, but they didn't know there was another way. And when everybody, in the world essentially goes virtual and they're sitting at home and they're going, I'm sorry, wait a second. What is it that we're supposed to do? What is supposed to be normal? What is it that my child is learning? How are we supposed to do this? All of a sudden it just became really vulnerable for parents looking at this and going, is this is what my kids are getting? This is education. And I think it gave parents the empowerment they should have already had, but I don't think they felt the freedom. All of a sudden, COVID-19 changed everything for so many families. And so here I am in this new commercial space where I offer something. I've been doing this for 5 years, and the whole world is going, oh my gosh, what do we do? Our whole state's going, what do we do? What do we do? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I can help you. I've been doing this a long time. No, I've already got something. Don't worry, I can help you. And it was just this moment of like personal fruition. I felt like for me I've been going along and saying, no, I can't take more kids. I only have 10. I can't take more. I can't take more. And all of a sudden I get in this space and I'm like, well, I thought I was going to take more in the fall, and I thought I was going to hire over the summer. And I had one parent who came in as I went to go meet to tutor their children, and they looked at me and they were like, we'd like to start Monday. Who do you think you need to hire for Monday? And I was like, oh, let me get back with you, because I had already been interviewing, but it was more like pie in the sky. And yeah. And so I was like, oh, they're real. Like, this isn't conversations anymore. This isn't, I had been doing, some consulting where I'm like, okay, I can help. I can help. But all of a sudden it was like by April of 2020, I had, and again, time, I feel like I say it's only like a month from March to April, but like it felt like 3 years. So I have been consulting nonstop. I'm on Zoom, on the phone, all these things, trying to help families. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I have to change something fast. So apparently this is going to change really fast. So I started opening it up. And so today we have 84 students, and we have 10 teachers that I have the privilege of working with. And we have multiple programs. We have some science that's done through outdoor education and biology, and focusing just on nature and being able to teach science through nature, and gross motor movement, all the things that I wanted. We have a kind of a lost homesteading skills class that we offer that helps kids over the school year to learn how to knit and crochet and can vegetables, and ferment foods and make sourdough and all of those things. And then our main tutoring components are just core academic subjects. And so I have teachers that come in for their specialty. And so families can sign up their kids. We have multiple sessions every single day where families can say, you know, I just would kind of like someone who loves math so much to teach my kids the kingdom of math. And so they just might sign up their kids for 2 tutoring sessions a week for math. Or at a maximum, we do geography, history, language arts. So we do our language arts program through geography and history. I never really wanted that like creative writing class. It was like, pretend you're a desk and write from the perspective of a desk. I thought, you know, I want to be able to like really teach really significant value concepts of humanity and education and the humanities through composers and beautiful inventors and historical wars. And what is it the kids want to learn about? Let's talk about these things. What is it you want to write about? If you want to write about being a desk, then that's what you should write. But if you want to talk about what it was like to be in the time frame of, you know, Genghis Khan, then that's what we're studying. So you should write about being that. And so I wanted to be able to do that. So we do all of the core academic content, and we have 2 like sessions a day every day. And then we also do private sessions. There's a lot of kids that need extra support before and after school. So we offer speech and language therapy as well. And we have a PT and all kinds of things that people can come in. And we have assessments. I actually have a school psychologist who was with the county, and he said, I'm going to retire and I want to feel like I did something really valuable to contribute. Because up to this point, I feel like I've just been a cog in the system. And I want to do something beautiful to end my career. And so he works with me, and it's one of the greatest privileges to be able to talk to homeschooling families and be able to say, I speak homeschool. It's okay. You don't have to be afraid. We have a beautiful person who is here to help you, and we can do the assessments and you don't have to be afraid. We're here to support you. How can we help you?
Oh, it's amazing. And it's mixed age, right, Marissa? It's multi-age, all grades for those
Yes.
84 students. So
Yes, all the grades. We like to be all together. What's not to love about an old school one-room schoolhouse?
yeah. So it kind of now thinking back to when you started off homeschooling and you're just you and your 3 kids in the back home on your property, and then feeling like that wasn't right, and then going to the Montessori school and saying, well, this is, you know, disruptive and alternative, but still not right.
Mhm.
Does now what you've built feel right?
It's so right. It's so right.
Ah!
It's I tell people all the time, I'm like, it's just utopia. They'll say, like, what do you do? I'm like, I just work at Utopia. It's everything that I could have hoped for. I can't even begin to describe the joy of being a person that gets to hire teachers, that it's a teaching utopia, that I get to look at teachers and say, you don't have to be afraid. It's not like that here. What do you love? What are you passionate about? How, I'm not going to micromanage you. How do you think that you should teach this child? Okay, I'm here for consulting to you too. Like, how can I help you? How can I empower you to do the art that you know is possible based off of a really beautiful layer of science and education? How do you do that? And so how can I empower you? So it's beautiful, not only for the students, but for the teachers. And when teachers are happy and teaching what they're passionate about, oh my goodness, beautiful things can happen. And they don't feel cogged down. They don't feel like they're limited. They feel empowered. They feel creative. And they get to be in their utopian teaching environment with small amounts of kids. It's amazing. And then on the kids side, to be able to watch children flourish, there's so many parts of education that I feel like there's issues in education because we have faulty premises that are an issue with why in education we talk about the antecedents and the behaviors and the consequences, and we can talk about behaviors all the time, but where's the antecedent conversations? People will say, well, do you have any issues, you know, on this? And well, no, we don't really have that, because we don't have the antecedents that brought the causation that then we just don't have that, because we don't have it. And so when children are flourishing emotionally, mentally, academically, when their families are thriving because they're spending time together and they have a 4-day, week to go to spend time at the beach, and we only, are not taking up all of their time and saying, here's our box, we hope you fit into it. Families get to really flourish as a family unit, and whatever that looks like for them. And so when everybody's flourishing, it's hard to create something that feels discouraging. So yeah, it's definitely the right thing 9 years in, and I hope that I get to be part of it forever.
Oh, that's so great. Well, I suspect that listeners and viewers are inspired by what you've built and might want to go off and create something similar. So, what advice do
Hope
you
so.
have for them in creating something similar to Urban Cottage in their own communities?
I really hope that that is true. There are not enough options for families. And so I think two encouragements that I try and give when people talk on this topic. The first one that I usually try and say is that find your point of differentiation. What is it that you feel that you can contribute that's the most different, and what makes you you? What's your ethos to what you can contribute? Because if you can find what that is, then you know the ethos of what your concept should be. And so if you love, sorry, if you, sorry, if you're able to go and do this differently, then what is it that can make your environment beautiful? How can you start something for children to be able to say, this is what we do, and we can contribute skating, surfing, great big movements, big, maybe you're a science professor, and maybe you're just really interested teacher, maybe you're a PT, maybe there's all kinds of ways in which we can do something different. And whatever that is, that's your differentiator, I would really encourage people to move forward on that, because that's what's going to make their light shine, because they're able to do something beautiful that fits them, and that families can resonate and say, we've been looking for that. And so everybody feels empowered that way. And I would say the second thing that's really, really important is when we're disrupting education, I think it's really important to think about the sustainability of our projects. If I have something in my heart and mind that I want to do, and it lasts for 2 or 3 years, that's wonderful, because I made impacts for 2 or 3 years. But I don't really think that's really disrupted education. I want to disrupt education forever. I want education to never be the same again. And so I want the cottage to exist in 20 years, and 50 years, and in 100 years. I want the students who go to school in 100 years to never, ever have to deal with some of the things that children who go to school in 2015 and 2020 and 2024, that some of them have to deal with. I want education to be disrupted forever. And so as people are thinking about what are the concepts of what can we innovate, then I really want to ask people, whatever you're innovating, how do we sustain this concept? How do we keep it going forever? What are the decisions that we need to make today to make sure that this is around in 10 years, so that we genuinely have the ability to make this last forever? I want education to never be the same again.
Amazing. Well, you are certainly an inspirational model for what education can and should look like. It's just so exciting to see what you've built, and encouraging others to build something similar in their own communities. So, Marissa, if my listeners and viewers are interested in learning more about Urban Cottage Educational Collaborative, want to connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely, through social media on Instagram, Urban Cottage Educational. They can find us. We're a little black and white logo. And then on Facebook, Urban Cottage Educational. And we also have a website, urbancottage.us. You can go there. I would say the best way is through Instagram, just simply because there's so many beautiful pictures. And if anybody's like me, I'm very visual. I want to see, what does it look like? And so that's basically our catalog on Instagram. So
I love it. Well, best wishes to you. I look forward to seeing you
thank you.
again in person at the National Hybrid Schools Conference this April in Atlanta. Hopefully, viewers and
Right.
listeners will be there as well. I'll put a link in the show notes to that conference. And Marissa Hess, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was such a joy.